Hey, how's it going, Bible Talk family? Welcome back to Bible Talk with BW, where we read scripture, we observe it, and we apply it to our lives. Today's Friday. I'm still going to do my Through the Bible Thursday on Friday. I was pretty tired last night, and I just want to be able to give my all when I go through this and record it, just so I get the most out of it and you get the most out of it. And so I've chosen to, I didn't do it last night just because I was really tired, so I just wanted to get some rest and then to spend time studying and just going over this chapter a few more times. And but here we are. We're in Genesis 21. We're going to go through Genesis 21 now. And I'm just going to share what I've learned over this week, and maybe there's something else that pops out as we're reading, which is always fun for me, stories that come up or whatever else. But that being said, let's get into this. It's Genesis 21. This is the birth of Isaac. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. I talked about this on Monday. God answers his promises, and whatever promise you feel like God's given you in your life, he's faithful and just to fulfill his promise to us. Whatever that desire in our heart is, that was for him, he will honor, and he's just to fulfill his promise. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. 8 days is how long it takes for the body to be able to clot, to perform blood clots, which is really cool that, through the Bible, through history, God always said these things, and even though the people didn't quite know why, God knew the reason why the people were to do whatever they were to do. I think the word is coagulates. The blood will coagulate at 8 days old, as to where before that, if a child was to get circumcised, they would just continuously bleed. But at 8 days, the body is able to coagulate and stop bleeding. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. I talked about this. I think I said 50 years in one of my last videos, but it took 25 years for God to give Abraham his promise to when God's promise was fulfilled, which tells you and tells me, and many other stories in the Bible, God always seems to give a time frame or a period of time where he'll put something in our brain, a promise to us, and then we're set to build our faith over that time and just know that in his timing, that promise will be fulfilled. And that's the hardest thing to do, even for me, especially for me. I'm a very impatient person. And so I feel like I get something in my heart, on my mind, and I want it to happen now. And I often will feel a calling to something, and I'm forced to wait and wait and wait. But God's timing is perfect. I look back through my life, and I've never really planned things out. I've just been faithful in what I was doing. I was given an opportunity, I work hard, and then the next thing comes, and I do that, and then the next thing comes, and I do that, and I work hard, and I'm faithful. And I see God has always been there for me, and He's always been there for my family, even when we don't always know what's next for us. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. So before, Sarah was laughing because she she doubted God. She was laughing at the fact that God said that they were going to have a child. Now she's laughing because she's amazed, and she knows that because of this amazing story, others are going to be amazed about her story, and others are going to laugh along with her. And that's what's so great about our testimonies, is when we share good news with people, when we share how Jesus has transformed our life, people can't help but be happy with us, at least if they're true friends. So, some people will see that and maybe feel like, I don't know, maybe feel threatened by it for some reason, because you're no longer the same person you were. And that for whatever reason, that seems to threaten some people. But those who truly love you and care for you, when they see a change for the better in your life, when we see people who've come to Christ and it's impacted them in amazing ways and their whole life has changed for the better, when we see people go through hard times, but yet they're still worshiping Jesus, we can't help but laugh along with them. And it's so amazing to me. And that's what she's saying here, these people will laugh along with me. And she added, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." I think it's funny that she points to his old age, but leaves out the fact that she's old as well. It tends to be a trend with women and guys. We kind of just get older and just accept it as to where, I'm not going to say all women, but there's a majority of them who will, keep the hairs dyed and, put on a little bit more makeup, get the tummy tucks and the implants, and they just try their hardest to stay looking young. And I just find it funny, even back then, she points out his old age, but leaves out her old age as well. It's where he was 90 and she was 80. "The child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast." It's a great thing when our children no longer rely on milk. I was thinking about this the other day. We had ribs, and my wife read somewhere that it's actually good for babies to be able to chew on rib bones. So it was really cool. We ate ribs, and we gave Isaiah, my son, some rib bones, and he just stuck it in his mouth and was chewing on this rib bone. I was like, yeah, that's my boy. It's a really exciting thing when our babies can go from milk to meat. And even spiritually speaking, when we're raising our children, I haven't experienced this fully yet, but I've experienced this as being raised and then now being able to learn from the word myself. When we see our children be able to listen to what we tell them about the Bible, there's a great thing, and it's a great celebration when they can go and find their own truths from the word. When they can take a chapter and learn from it themselves without having to rely on the milk, so to speak. So this is verse 8. "The child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking, and she said to Abraham, 'Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac.'" I find it interesting that a couple things here. One, Ishmael was about 17 years old here, and Isaac was about 3 years old, and Ishmael was making fun of Isaac, and it just rubbed Sarai the wrong way. Some might think, how could a 17-year-old pick on a 3-year-old? Well, if you say that, I don't know, maybe you don't have any siblings or don't have any children. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking about my little brother and I. I think he was about 3 years old, and I'm 8 years older than him, but I told him he couldn't do a push-up, and so he said, "I can do push-ups," and so he tried to do push-ups, and I started making fun of him. I said, "You can't do a real push-up," and he stood up, and he looked at me and just right in my face, and then he looked at me and then took off running because he knew he made a mistake. But there's just something about brothers especially where the older will just pick on the younger for whatever reason. Um, but that's what was happening here. Ishmael was picking on Isaac, and Sarah got mad. So and I also point out that Sarah was Abraham's son, but she refused to call Ishmael her son. And there's a lot of broken families right now with a lot of um, sadness. There's a lot of families where brothers have the same dad, but different moms. And what I love about this story, at least Abraham really loves Ishmael. We see that earlier, and we see it in this story. But I see there's so many families out there where the dad will pick one son over the other, and just they'll see the mistake they've made, and they choose to not even acknowledge their son as their son. And it's pretty heartbreaking, and it affects people in tremendous ways. And it's sad because, as we see here, Ishmael was a mistake. They tried to fulfill God's promise because they didn't trust that God was going to fulfill the promise to them. So they tried to help God out. And Ishmael was born, and Ishmael is he's gonna be blessed because he's Abraham's son. But he has to go through a hard time because of that decision that Abraham and Sarah made. And we're going to see the nation that follows Ishmael and Israel. They're always butting heads constantly throughout history, and it all happened because Abraham and Sarah tried to take matters into their own hands. The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. See, Abraham considers Ishmael his son, which is why I strongly believe that because Abraham did love his son, that's why Ishmael was able to become a great nation still. He had that love of his dad, and he also had the blessing of God because Abraham was a godly man, and God blessed Ishmael because of his father. Let that speak to us all. The love of a father can go a long way. But God said to him, "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring." Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulder and then sent her off with the boy. I find it interesting that I'm going to highlight this, but I find it interesting. Abraham was a very wealthy guy during this time, but he sent them off with a little bit of bread and some wineskin full of water. He didn't send them off with a ton of stuff. And for a while, I wondered how come, but I believe it's just because he knows God. God said that he was going to bless this family, and maybe he knew the importance of being able to survive on your own, being able to trust in God for yourself the way Abraham had to do throughout his life. So he sent them with just enough to get by so that they can learn and grow for themselves rather than being given handouts, so to speak. He set them on her shoulder and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, "I cannot watch the boy die." And as she sat there, she began to sob. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What is the matter, Hagar?" I love this story. If you guys remember earlier, the angel of the Lord, first off, is a Christophany. It's Jesus. It's an appearance of Jesus in the Old Testament. And Jesus promised Hagar earlier that he was going to bless Ishmael. He was going to make Ishmael a great nation. And now he's coming back and he's saying, "What's the matter? I told you that I was going to bless Ishmael, And yet, have you lost faith? Have you stopped believing that already? And I always picture, the story of when Jesus tells his disciples, let's go to the other side of the lake. And so they get in the boat and they're going, and Jesus falls asleep, and all of a sudden a storm comes, and they wake him up and in a panic. And Jesus he's talking to them. He said, oh, ye of little faith. Wasn't I the one that said, let's go? You got to believe that we're going to get there. I'm not going to lead you anywhere that is going to danger us. Yeah, there might be a storm along the way, but I'm sleeping. I'm not worried about it. And I feel like that's what he's doing. He's saying, have you forgotten what I've said to you already? And so often we can do that same thing. We feel God's promise. And I just think about how many promises there are in the Bible. Just a few, like Psalms 37:4. 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just. Romans 8:37. We are more than conquerors. Jeremiah 31. His love for us is everlasting. There's so many promises in the Bible. So many. If I went through them all, it would just take way too long. And so often we just forget. We lose hope. We lose heart. It's like we forget what Jesus did for us on the cross. We forget that the creator of all things came down and laid down his life for us. The person who created you, his hands are bloody because he took those nails for us. If he loved us enough to do that, he loves us enough to get us to our destination, where he wants us to go. And I forget this often, and I have to remind myself, man, why am I worrying? Why am I stressed out? Why? God is in control. I don't know what my future holds, but I know who holds it. And I love the fact that Jesus was there in the Old Testament with these guys, because Jesus was there in the beginning. He is God. Jesus is with us right now, and Jesus is going to be with us in the future. He's always been here, and he always will be here. It's such great comfort knowing that, Jesus is alive in heaven. He didn't die and that was it. He rose from the dead, ascended into heaven, and he's seated at the right hand of God on the throne. Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying. It's verse 17. As he lies there, lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. This is reassurance again. She's reminding her, I told you this once before, but I'm going to tell you again. I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. I love that. When God opens our eyes, we find relief. We find what we were worrying about wasn't worth worrying about. There was a well right there in front of her, but she was so focused on what she didn't have that she lost heart, that she thought her son was going to die. Jesus is telling us the same thing. What are you worried about? What are you crying about? What are you stressed about? Things might seem bad, but just look up. Look up to heaven. Keep your eyes focused on heaven. Keep your eyes focused on the cross. Look up to that cross where Jesus laid. And there we find refreshment. Water is refreshing. We find refreshment. We find tranquility. We find peace that surpasses understanding. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer. This is like a golden archer. He was a master archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got a wife for him from Egypt. Verse 22. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his forces, said to Abraham, God is with you in everything that you do. This is the same Abimelech earlier that Abraham tricked into, saying that Sarah was his sister and caused Abimelech to go through a hard time. But now Abimelech went up to him and says, wow, by the way you live your life, I can see, man, God is really with you. He's with you in everything that you do. Now swear to me here before God that you will not deal falsely with me or my children or my descendants. So he says, I can see by the way you're living your life that God is really with you. Now, make a promise with me that you'll do good to me as I've done to you, because he's let him live in his kingdom, in his land, and he's, Abraham has prospered in this land. He's continued, he gave him all those riches and cattle and slave women and all kinds of things. So he's saying, hey, I remember that I've done good to you. So now please just keep us in your mind and do the same as we've done for you. Show me in the country where you now reside as a foreigner the same kindness I have shown to you. Abraham said, I swear it. Then Abraham complained to Abimelech. I love this because it shows humility first, and then it shows humility because he's saying God is with you, and now it shows, he says, I swear. Then Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well of water. And now this is showing honesty. He's not flattered by what Abimelech said. He's not saying, oh, yeah, God's with me. I'm pretty cool, huh? Look at all the stuff I have. No, he says, all right, I'll honor what you say. But now Abraham said, okay, I have a bone to pick with you. Abraham said, I swear it. Then Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servant had seized. But Abimelech said, I don't know who has done this. You did not tell me, and I heard about it only today. And now we see he shows charity because he believes what Abimelech says. Abraham said, okay, so I believe you that you didn't know this thing, so let's make a treaty, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So Abraham brought sheep and cattle and gave them to Abimelech, and the two men made a treaty. He said, okay, I believe you that you didn't know this. Let's make a treaty so that this problem won't happen in the future. We made this well. This was a well that we made. Took a lot of work. If you guys don't know, making a well is very hard work. They didn't have any power equipment or tools. So they dug this well, and then the people around Abimelech took this well from them. And so now Abraham is telling them, hey, this is our well. So Abraham set apart 7 ewe lambs, this is little lambs, from the flock. And Abimelech asked Abraham, what is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs you have set apart by themselves? He replied, accept these 7 lambs from my hand as a witness that I dug this well. So he's saying, okay, we made a treaty with animals. Now let's make a living treaty with these lambs. I want you to have these lambs so you can look at them and be reminded of the promise that we made. So that place was called Beersheba because the 2 men swore an oath there. After the treaty had been made at Beersheba, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his forces, returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the eternal God. I talked about this earlier. Abraham found a new way of worshiping God. He found a new form of identity in God because of that worship. The eternal God. He found a fresh revelation of the nature or the person of God because of a new way of worshiping. And that's what we can do as well. We should find new ways to try to honor God and worship God, because when we do that, we get to find a new revelation of who our God is. And Abraham stayed in the land of the Philistines for a long time. And that is the end of Genesis 21. When I first started reading this chapter, I didn't think there was much in there, but the more I read it, the more things that I just found that stood out. And I love it that I can relate my life to so many stories in the Bible. It just tells me that the Bible is a living word. It's a living testimony of God. And the more I'm studying, the more I'm learning, the more I'm just so grateful that God has called us, that He gave us a way to be saved, that we can have His Spirit, that by believing in Jesus Christ, who died on the cross, that we can have everlasting life with Him. And the more that I'm studying, the more I'm learning, the more I'm in prayer, the more I'm worshiping, the closer I feel to the Lord, but at the same time, the more I'm realizing how far I am from the Lord. And it just makes me want to continue to grow and learn and be a better father, a better husband, a better son. And that's what we should be doing. We should be striving to be a light, especially right now. Let the world see us by how we live our lives. When people look at you, are they saying, I can see that you're a man of God? Are people afraid of our prayers? Are we so close to God that our prayers have power? I always come back to the stories of those guys who tried to cast out a demon in the name of Jesus, but didn't have that power, and the demons just laughed at him. They said, I know, I know Jesus, I know Paul, but I don't know who you are. And then they got beat up and their clothes got taken and they ran away naked. But do the demons know your name? Are you in prayer so much that you're a force to be reckoned with, that Satan is terrified of you because of the power you have in Jesus? And that's where I want to get. I don't think I'm there yet, but I want to get so close that the demons tremble when they see me coming. The people around me can see a light, that they can see that God is with me. And that's what I want for all my family and all my friends. That's what I want for the world, honestly. But I appreciate you guys' time, and yeah, that's all I have. Until next time.